So, what does it actually look like inside a huge corporation when global travel just stops? Well, we got a look at a restricted internal risk briefing from April 2026. And honestly, it paints a really stark picture of how the entire Asia Pacific region basically ground to a halt. Let's dig into exactly what went down. This is the very first thing the executives saw. No warm up, no gentle introduction, just one word, in all caps, setting the tone for everything: red. And that's the highest possible alert level. It's a signal that the system isn't just a little stressed, it's fundamentally broken. And here's the why behind it. As the briefing says, this wasn't some quick temporary glitch that came and went. Nope. This was a slow, creeping crisis that basically became a permanent feature of travel in the region. So the big question is, how on earth did things get this bad? Okay, to really wrap our heads around the scale of this, we first need to understand what posture red actually means for, a regular person just trying to get from point A to point B. So in plain English, red means the buffer is completely gone. All the backup plans, they've failed. The system has just lost its ability to absorb any more shocks. At this point, travel becomes a high-stakes gamble, and it only gets approved if there is absolutely no other choice. And just look at this map. This isn't one country having a bad week. The entire Asia Pacific is red. From East Asia all the way down to Australia and New Zealand, every single major part of the region is in a state of severe disruption. We're talking about a continent-wide shutdown. So how does an entire region even get to this point? Well, the briefing breaks it down into what you can only call a perfect storm of crises, all hitting at once. Let's take a look at the anatomy of how this whole collapse was built, piece by piece. So it really boils down to these three things. First, you've got a massive shock to the fuel supply. Second, new and really aggressive security laws are creating huge legal headaches. And third, you've got geopolitical tensions that are closing borders and making travel routes totally insecure. Any one of these is a major problem on its own. But when you put them all together, that's when you get this cascading failure. The fuel shortages meant fewer flights, right? That put more pressure on the few routes that were still open, which were then made even more complicated by border clashes and new data security rules. The Jenga analogy is perfect. You pull one block, and the whole thing starts to wobble. What's really fascinating about this document is how it tracks the crisis week by week. You can literally watch how what started as manageable problems just spiraled into a total system failure in less than a month. You can just see the escalation here. It started with a pretty straightforward compliance issue in China. A week later, airports start to fail, creating regional instability. The week after that, a refinery fire and a cyclone hit, which just wiped out any remaining backup capacity. By the time this briefing was written, the chaos had become the new normal, and that's exactly what makes it so incredibly dangerous. Now, this is a really crucial insight from the analysts. The situation might feel a bit less chaotic now, but it's actually way more dangerous. Why? Because the disruption is now baked into the system, but all the backup options and safety nets, they've been completely used up. And this quote just hammers that point home. What it means is while things might look a little calmer on the surface, new problems are stacking up behind the scenes where no one can see them. A single new delay, something that a month ago would have been just an inconvenience, could now trigger a complete collapse of a traveler's entire trip with literally no way to recover. Okay, so that's the high-level view. But what does all this chaos actually mean for a person on the ground just trying to do their job? Well, the briefing gets into the specific, very real dangers. First off, the fuel. Jet fuel is at nearly $200 a barrel. And this isn't just an accounting problem for airlines. The IMF is calling it the largest energy shock on record. This is the reason airlines are just grounding planes and canceling routes altogether. And this is the result. I mean, look at this table. In Australia, a refinery fire means your flight just gets canceled. In Hong Kong, you could be forced to hand over your phone and password, even if you're just changing planes. In India, sudden airspace restrictions mean your flight gets rerouted and oops, you miss your connection. And over at the Thai-Cambodian border, armed clashes mean all land travel is off the table. It's a minefield of totally distinct, unpredictable risks. So, if you absolutely, positively have to travel, what in the world are you supposed to do? The last part of this briefing lays out a new, pretty harsh set of rules for operating in this kind of environment. These are basically the new rules of survival. Only travel if it's mission critical. Use clean, disposable burner devices for China and Hong Kong to protect your data. You have to add an extra day with an overnight stay for any long trip to India or Australia, because delays are pretty much a guarantee. Same-day trips are banned, and there are absolute no-go zones, like the Thai border. This isn't business as usual. This is operating in a crisis zone. So, the big question is, does it get any better from here? Well, the analysts who wrote this briefing actually ran the numbers and came up with a forecast for what's likely to happen next. And, well, the outlook is pretty bleak. There's a 60% chance things just stay severely disrupted. But on top of that, there's a 25% chance things actually get worse, with more cancellations and an even higher risk of total failure. If you add that up, it's an 85% probability that the crisis continues or even deepens. There's only a slim 15% chance of even a slight improvement. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty sobering thought. This particular shutdown was a perfect storm of energy, security, and geopolitics all hitting at once. It really goes to show just how fragile our interconnected systems are. So the question we should all be asking is, what seemingly unrelated events are converging right now, and what system will they break next?